on that later, because right now we've got Armageddon already underway. So much action, not enough time. You can go to chess.com/events to follow the games yourself. Go ahead and do it. I've got it open as well. Here we go. Magnus with white, Hikaru with black, Armageddon.
Magnus sacrifices Hannah.
Exactly. Did you expect that, David? I was going to ask, what was your prediction in terms of the opening for this game? Did you expect Magnus to go for this?
No, Magnus doesn't tend to repeat his openings. You remember yesterday, Ding, the Classical, the Armageddon, they were very different types of openings. Magnus normally switches things up, but here he's taken Hikaru head-on, pretty much up the challenge here. He's gone for a piece sacrifice temporarily. He's regained the material with a fork. White has the bishop pair. White has the better pawn structure, but watch out. Black has a huge threat. C5, hitting the white queen, then C4, locking down the white bishop. Really typical idea in the Spanish opening. But Hikaru prepared again. Is this wisdom? Is this madness from Magnus?
I have no idea what's going on in terms of Hikaru. As he said, he has a huge backlog of preparation from the candidates, and it has been going really well for him. Yesterday against Fabiano, today against Magnus. But now, who is happier here with the opening? Who has out-prepared whom, Danny?
I mean, I think Hikaru's happy again, just from the perspective that he's already taken a minute off of the edge. Remember, white has 10, black has 7. So, okay, there's still plenty to go. And it's a 3-result game for sure. But I feel like Hikaru is once again happy. He's not showing any signs of not being prepared for this position. So, okay.
Yeah, he's just got active play, active pieces, Hikaru here. The black knight on e5 compensates for the bishop pair, at least for now. Slightly backward pawn on d6, but easily defended for now. You could imagine that pawn stepping forward later upon sufficient preparation. Yeah, it feels like also issues for Magnus, how to complete development. Knight d2 always met by a knight landing into d3, I was going to say, so he prepares that one first. He covers the d3 square. And Hikaru, just the speed.
He's a speed demon.
Yeah.
He is a speed demon, and he needs it here because black starts with 3 minutes less on the clock. But now the time advantage is only 2 minutes for Magnus, and black has draw odds. We need to emphasize that because that is the Armageddon format. Hikaru doesn't need to win this game to win the point for the Armageddon.
I love the chat. This is going to be good. Yes, it is. This is going to be good. We agree. And yeah, okay, Hikaru taking his first real think of the game. He had 7 minutes to start, but he really has just used a few seconds on every move. So that was the first time he paused and really measured the position. Finds queen to c8, an interesting move. It threatens queen a8 in some spots. You get a battery against the e4 pawn. You're also just keeping an eye on the h3 h3 c8 diagonal. And by the way, here is keeping an eye on the king side. Magnus with an aggressive queen h5.
Yeah, Magnus eyeing some checkmates potentially on h7. Maybe trying to take a pawn simply on e5, although you'd have to calculate once the d-file becomes open here. I think Hikaru's plan with queen c8 was to drop his knight back to g6. I saw him kind of angling for that knight earlier, and then to break open the center with d5. But that looks really risky with white's queen lurking nearby. So, yeah, Magnus not necessarily playing for an objective advantage from the opening, but still imbalanced enough to create winning chances. And that 3-minute edge, it's pretty much back. Hikaru has really slowed down on the last few turns.
He has slowed down, and that's for a reason, because Magnus is putting a lot of pressure on him. And the queen on h5, it's looking very annoying. Even if black were to trade queens at some point with queen g4, I don't think that's an endgame that Hikaru would like to play with the backward d6 pawn being so weak.
Yeah, he might have to play that endgame though, sooner or later. It does feel too scary to maintain the tension for that long. And okay, first he hits the white bishop, which will not trade off for a knight. It will step back. There we go. f4, a bit of a threat. So Hikaru gaining space, carving out squares for himself now. Knight d3 incoming.
I like that move a lot. I think it was borderline only move. Maybe the computer didn't have time to suggest it, but with f4 coming, now Magnus really just smartly coordinated the rook on d1 and the bishop on g3 to hit black's only real weakness in the position, which is, of course, the d6 pawn. So there's a bit of a future problem for black, and so that's why Hikaru needed to be super accurate in how he maneuvered, and finding c4 I think was critical. Now we see Magnus thinking, because if that knight does get to d3, it's about to become a massive mess, right? And that light square bishop on b7 becomes a monster. You can almost do it in some positions in a sacrificial manner, depending on what happens with the tactics, right? So Magnus needs to pause and make sure he doesn't miscalculate and misstep right here.
And Hikaru keeps looking up to the ceiling almost, Beth Harmon style, but also because there's screens above them. Is he checking what move they are on? Is he checking it because he likes to see the digital board as well? It gives him an extra way of seeing the same position but different dimensions, not the 3D pieces, but what he's more used to, the screen. What do you think, David?
Yeah, a bit of both. We've all seen that that meme with Hikaru reaching for a mouse in over the board chest and it not being there. Maybe he feels more comfortable that way, as you say, Anna. But also, definitely half an eye on move 40.
And again,
I would even be if
it.
Hikaru was just thinking about his next trip to the conventional booth and making sure he's not missing any action in the other games. You know, I got to talk about. No, I'm kidding. I think he is dialed in on his own game, checking the move number. Maybe likes seeing it that way. Also, maybe just Hikaru look number 9, which is the confident look off to the right shoulder. We've seen him many times. Check out the catalog. All right, knight f1. Played by Magnus. It opens up the rook on d1, the bishop on g3, also spying d6. So, super tricky for both sides.
Yeah, it feels like you've got to be quick as Hikaru.
Yeah.
Both board and clock. Knight e3. If the white knight ever lands on f5, you will live to regret it. There'll be tactics all over the place. So he does jump in. He forces the trade. Knight for bishop. Opposite color bishops now. Magnus temporarily a pawn up, but the e4 pawn is dropping. The d6 pawn might drop. It's as if you predicted it, Danny.
Yeah.
Giving up a pawn for dynamism.
Well, and queen c4 is also possible at some point. It hits the rook on d3 and hits a2. I'm not sure you want that versus just taking e4. But I would say let's just highlight the one transition of the position that Hikaru was happy about is opposite color bishops. You've now got a light square bishop on b7 and a dark square bishop on g3. And so even if you go down a pawn, if you're Hikaru, a draw wins the game. And that was intentional. He's willing to be down a pawn in an endgame that has great drawing chances.
Yeah, and interesting that Magnus does not trade rooks to win a pawn. There was actually a tactic in the air there. If white had taken a pawn on d6, at the very end there would have been the move queen to c6. Maybe even bishop takes g2 first. The queen on c6 would have hit a piece on d6 and the g2 pawn. So Magnus playing against the IQP, the isolated queen's pawn. He's going to bring his knight forward next move. Pretty much guaranteed no matter what. I'm assuming knight e3. Covering squares going forward. White's pieces are active. White's slightly better here, Anna.
Yes, slightly better, and still has quite a big time advantage. I think Magnus has been doing well. Maybe one of the first few players in Armageddon to be able to maintain the time advantage. They start with 3 extra minutes, but he's also doing well, holding on to the majority of that edge on the clock. And that's crucial because this is still only move 23, so 17 more moves to make for Hikaru before there's any increment at all.
By the way, this is only our second Armageddon game of the day. Ju and June already defeated on a Muzichuk, and Ding Liren and Pragnananda will start their Armageddon game in 6 minutes. And Faruja and Fabiano Caruana drew that position, so they will start 10 minutes after that. So we are not going to be going anywhere. No more breaks for the rest of the day. It's all Armageddon fun in back-to-back-to-back-to-back fashion.
And we love it. More chests, better.
All right. Magnus has to think about it. You just called out the time advantage, but he needs to maintain it because I think Hikaru is going to get great drawing chances at some point in this game. I see our Grandmaster David Howell nodding his head. It always feels good to have a GM agree with you. I think he's going to have great drawing chances. Magnus knows it, and I think that's partly why he's using his time right now. It's because this is your chance to create new problems, David, right? Like, mix it up right now. Be a nuisance before it's too late.
Exactly, and he tries that by going for a different angle. The white queen stepping back, now really kind of suggesting that he's going to grab that weak pawn on d6. Hikaru, I don't think will react with any panic. Queen to e6 would hit, for example, the a2 pawn. At some point, black might just say, fine, have it, take my pawn, and just give the black king some breathing space, some luft, so you don't blunder any back rank checkmates later. Magnus still in control here, Anna, but Hikaru can't be feeling too bad about life.
Yes, I agree with both of you, but I think Hikaru has done really well with that pawn sacrifice. Great idea to go for a simplification. Many trades have happened since, and even if that pawn will be taken on d6, giving Magnus the extra pawn that we are talking about, that leads to even further trades of pieces with the opposite colored bishops, making it really drawish, and that's what Hikaru wants. He's got draw odds in this game, and he's using it very well in his favor. But, Danny, there's a question mark now with h6. Why is that a question mark?
It could be the computer just doesn't like giving up the pawn, which is, okay, objectively true, right? And the computer likes winning a pawn for white, but I don't think it changes what the match strategy is here. Hikaru knows he has opposite colored bishops, and that has good drawing chances. Magnus knows that doesn't mean it's a walk in the park, though, and he's going to try to create problems that leverage his advantage on the clock. So, you know, it's game on here. I think queen e8's a nice move, threatens queen e4, so Magnus says no thank you, but will Hikaru offer the queen trade? Now that's an interesting question, right? Because does the queen trade help? No, Hikaru says no, I don't want it. Looks like this particular camera angle is dead frozen, so we keep going there. But we got, okay, we're definitely getting action, and maybe we got so many cameras in this building. Shout out to the team setting it all up and doing it. But that particular one doesn't seem to be live right now. All right, knight e7 coming to f5. I think getting the knights off the board, David, is a big advantage to the defender. So Magnus says no thank you and plays queen d3 check.
Really clever move there. Yeah. Right now, the players, it's going through their mind which pieces they want to keep on the board, which ones they want to get off. Black definitely wants the knights off the board, as you say, Danny. Queens, that's more debatable. He's offering the queen trade now, Hikaru, maybe out of necessity more than anything. If Magnus does allow the queens off, he cannot allow the knights to be traded ever. So key moment, does he move the white queen, allow the black queen in maybe with some checks? I mean, queen d7 looks very tempting with some calculation to be done. Or does he trade? He gets them off the board.
He trades.
But now the margin is so small. If those knights had come off, draw instantly, Anna.
Exactly, and that's why Magnus avoids it, even if it means having to place his knight on d1, but he needs to keep material on the board. It cannot just be the opposite colored bishop endgame, which is extremely draw-ish and would have been a draw. Hikaru's shaking his head. Was he going to make a mistake?
He was about to make a mistake, but he shook it off, smiled. It's because king c5 is coming, and this is the problem. It's an obstacle bishop ending, yes, but the real advantage, and I was trying to calculate the king walk, didn't have time to say it out loud, but David's now highlighting it. From the very beginning, the reason Magnus took that queen on g6, you saw him pause to calculate, is because he knew, David, that he could win the sprint to the queen side, and that was the key to the decision, and ultimately to whether Magnus can win this endgame. If that king gets to b6, you've got king activity problems, right? You've got other issues if you're Hikaru to defend, and I'm actually feeling more nervous about this position for Hikaru now than I have been.
I think you're right why you're nervous about it. I'm not sure why Magnus is thinking about king c5. David, what is he seeing there? Isn't king c5 very obvious?
Yeah, I didn't really understand. Maybe just indecision, Armageddon, it gets to the best of us. Magnus did pause, did find the best move. I think he wanted to activate the white knight, but ultimately jumping in with the king of the hill here is way more important. As Danny mentioned, he's raced forward, and only now does he start to improve the white knight. Okay, what next though? How to clinch this? Is it walking forward with a white king simply to create a plus pawn?
I'm feeling more and more like this Magnus is going to find a way to get this. It's principle of two weaknesses, clinical, right? You talk about it. The key is that if that knight moves from e7, everybody, the f5 square becomes available for Magnus's knight. And if you don't go to e7, there you go. Then the king will get to b6. The knight would have loved to have been on a square like c8, holding back the lions. You see Hikaru shake his head, and yeah, I'm thinking that there's just enough on both sides of the board for Magnus to maybe get this one.
Just enough material left, as you say. Knight still key to this position. Even if white wins this A pawn now, wins a second pawn, if knights disappear, it's a draw. So you need to be careful as Magnus Carlsen right now. I was going to say, do you step forward with pawns, block the advance of black's kingside pawns? Magnus says no, he's going after the black knight. If he could trade bishop for knight, Magnus wins. Opposite color bishops is the main thing he needs to avoid. And also the clock now, they're not yet. Oh, sorry, they have just reached move 40.
Yeah, they have completed move 40, so that's good news for at least starting to get an increment, but the increment is only 1 second increment per move. In over-the-board chess, that is not much, if anything, at all. You cannot make your moves as fast as it would be with the mouse on an online board.
And Magnus now, he's cashing in the advantage. He's gone after a second pawn. Notice how he's kept the white king active where it is. He's locked the opponent's pawns on dark squares on the king side, and now they're just dropping off. Risky strategy by Magnus to put his own pawns on light squares, but they are nicely protected by white's knight. This one, it looks over. Hikaru under 20 seconds now.
Oh, the pawns have been falling. The a6 pawn is still hanging as well. Hikaru is trying to get his bishop in to attack the kingside pawns of Magnus, but Magnus is pointing out that also the remaining pawns on the kingside for black are weak, and now he captures on a6. It's 3 extra pawns now.
Yeah, and there we go. Hikaru resigns. Magnus Carlsen takes the win in Armageddon. Great endgame technique, showing the benefits of active pieces, but it was close. Hikaru had his chances to hold that.
It was super close, and I still think Hikaru had a great strategy going in. I think he had a great opening, and he got that obstacle bishop position that had good chances. And I think, you know, we would have to have some game review to back it up.